Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started just because we do have quite a bit we want to try to go over in this 30 minutes. Again, welcome. We are so glad you are all here. My name is Jill. I am the customer success manager here for Sim Tutor and SimTix. I'm going to introduce our lovely guest speaker, Amy, here in a moment. We appreciate you all coming in. We wanted to have this webinar because our webinar is about flipped classrooms and how it can transform your teaching. Over the past few years, with how things have changed in the classroom, online education, all the different technology, thought this would be a great topic to go over with you all on how to build a flipped classroom, how to maximize your in-person sessions, and quite a bit of other information that we're going to try to cover today. We will be sending everyone a copy of the recording and all the resources. Everyone's mic is turned off, so feel free to utilize the chat today. Any feedback, any questions, we will definitely try to answer as many questions as we can as we go along. But we will make sure to send out resources if for some reason we don't get to all of the questions in the chat. I do want to introduce Amy Samuel. She is the Associate Professor and Program Director of Medical Assisting for the University of Alaska. She's our guest speaker today. So Amy, if you want to say anything additional about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining and letting me tell my story about how we use simulation in a flipped classroom setting in Alaska. As you know, Alaska is the biggest state, and I have students all over the state, not just in one location. So that presents a challenge in itself. I will say that I live in Fairbanks, Alaska, North Pole to be specific. North Pole, if any of you have been there and saw Santa. And my actual program lives in Sitka, Alaska, which is in the Panhandle, southeast of Alaska, and that's about 800 miles away. So you can see on this little map of Alaska right in the center, we call it the interior. That is where I live, and then our program is where the little blue square is, way down in the Panhandle. My students come from all over Alaska, as you can also see from this map. I have a little dot in all of the cities and towns and villages where my students have come from. And I have one up in that little corner up north, and he was a student from a village of 200, and he flew all the way down to Juneau to do his clinicals about 1,100 miles away. So we have a very big state. And I will say, in answering the first question, most of my students, the average age of my students, 36. So I definitely can relate to a lot of you who were saying you have, 20 to 60 in your classrooms. So that's nice to hear. And so maybe some of the tips today might help you too.
Wonderful. Thanks, Amy. There's somebody who commented that they've been there.
Good. Excellent. We like
Wonderful.
people to come visit.
Just not in the winter time. Just kidding. Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Amy. We do appreciate you. Amy has been a customer of SimTutor for a long time, so she is very knowledgeable with the flipped classroom approach. So we appreciate you being here. Amy, tell us a little bit about your role and the unique challenges that you face in teaching your medical assisting students, especially with being in a remote location as well.
Yeah, thank you. Because of the distance of our state and where students are coming from, accessibility can be a challenge. I've designed the program so that students anywhere in the state and even out of state, I have a couple of out of state students who have ties to Alaska, they can access content and an accredited program that will allow them to sit for a credential and help their communities. So it is a challenge, the distance on occasion. In Alaska, we're pretty used to traveling and getting on a plane. The jets go to most majority of cities. And so students and people in general in Alaska are used to traveling by airplane. It's not unusual. So that is probably our biggest challenge. When I first was introduced to SimTix, I was concerned about the Wi-Fi in remote areas and wondering if that was going to be a challenge for my students. So I created a pilot program one semester where we tried it out, and students from all over the state were on SimTix, and it didn't become a challenge at all. So it was very solid. We do still have some Wi-Fi connections in and out, but overall that hasn't been the challenge that I thought it would be.
That is good. I would definitely worry about that. I mean, uh, that's great though. Tell us how you would define a flipped classroom, because I don't even know if everyone on this call understands what does a flipped classroom mean. But what does it mean to you, and how do you feel like it differs from a traditional teaching method?
Yeah, let's poll the audience and see what their flipped classroom might look like and see what they think.
Feel free to use the chat. Let us know your thoughts on what a flipped classroom means to you. Yes, I like that. Less lecture, more interactive. Prepping at home to be engaged in the classroom. That has been a big one lately. Those are some great answers.
Brand new to the content. I like that. That's great. A lot of you are right on the dot. From my perspective, flipped classroom is very self-directed. So I might assign content or activities, but the students are doing the work themselves, and they may be in a study group, they may be on their own. It may be in the middle of the evening when it's convenient for them. It might be on a lunch hour, but it's very self-directed. So they're working with the content and the information that's presented on their own. And they learn the process of whatever it is that we're talking about, and then they apply it later in class. So some of you kind of indicated that they come to class prepared to work on the materials. So they're learning, they're being introduced to the topic, they're learning the process of the skill that we're covering that week, and then they actually have the ability to apply it. So baby steps. It also allows for reflection and scaffolding of those concepts. So from a cognitive concept, they're being introduced to topics that they might not otherwise know. They might have never drawn blood before. They might have, but they might have never drawn blood before, which could be a really intimidating topic. But if they're slowly getting exposed to it, that allows them that reflection time, that processing time, and then they can come to class to build on that information. So you guys are all kind of on the right track, but that's what it means to me.
Great. Thanks, Amy. We are going to take a poll here in a minute, because we do want to ask, what role does technology play in facilitating a flipped classroom approach? Because that's a huge one. We can take a poll real quick and see who it. We'd love to know if you are currently incorporating simulation-based learning in your curriculum. Give it a moment to see. And then Claire, will it show us the results here in a moment? Ah, perfect. Oh, that's great. That's quite a bit. That's wonderful.
75-25 split. Okay, well, in our flipped classroom, it allows for a lot of multiple modalities to be utilized for multiple learning approaches. And I think somebody mentioned that in the chat as well, is that when you've got a diverse group of learners, they might appeal to different things, might appeal to them. So we can utilize video, we can utilize audio, we can utilize mini lecture, we can utilize gamification, we can utilize simulation. So it allows for a lot of different multiple modalities to appeal to different learning styles. That said, even some students who really appreciate social media or instant feedback, instant gratification, they're getting those awards. They're getting that satisfaction of getting a response of you did this correctly or try again. And they're getting that immediate reaction. So it keeps their attention on whatever it is that they're supposed to be studying, and they don't drift away. They don't tend to get into other activities. So it does provide that feedback and keeps their attention. It also allows them to, in my students population, they're busy. They have lives, they have work, they have families, and it allows them to do learning on the go. So they're able to take it with them and do one simulation at a time. They're able to actively be in a soccer game while their kid is at practice, and then they can do simulation to accommodate their life needs. So I find that technology has a big role in student lives, and this flipped classroom approach really does have a very central role in that.
That's great. And I know we've had some questions come into the chat too. We're definitely going to try to take some questions here soon. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves as well. I think I saw some people trying to give some feedback. If you are using a flipped classroom or you have ideas for each other, feel free to share feedback if you're doing specific things now that Amy is sharing. Because like I said, we'll send out the webinar recording and all the resources after this, and then we'll try to get to some questions here soon. So thank you guys for putting information in the chat. We definitely want to try to get to as many as we can. And then Amy, what learning objectives did you identify as being most suited for students to explore independently before they actually come into the classroom?
We primarily utilize SimTix for the clinical simulations and laboratory skills, point of care testing, any of those competencies that we're going to have them demonstrate in the classroom, but it provides an introduction and a base for them to at least have seen the steps of the skill. So primarily those clinical lab procedures that maybe they are nervous about giving an injection, or maybe they're nervous about drawing blood, poking a finger for the first time. And so it helps them with the fear and anxiety to be slowly introduced into that. And so I've really tried to focus our learning objectives on those clinical and lab skills.
Okay, great. No, I agree. I think in my experience as well, the more students can be exposed to something before they actually practice it is always very helpful, really in anything in life, right?
And the repetition too.
Yes.
Over and over and over.
I think that's a big part of the technology that I have seen as well. I've been working in education for the past 20 years, but being able to access the technology over and over again and being able to repeat things, definitely, I heard from many people and seen students that it has helped increase their skills and just, again, help with preparing them for the outside world too. So that's great. How are you assessing student learning and gauging their comprehension of the material since it is virtual versus you're not seeing them on an everyday basis and physically watching them?
I use the simulation activities for formative assessment, and I kind of count it as their lab time each week. Since we're not meeting in person on a weekly basis, we meet via Zoom 2 evenings a week for about an hour, and we go over the concepts for the class. But the SimTix simulations would be something they would do during the week as their homework. So I kind of count it as their lab time and time on task for that activity for the week. And as far as assessing it, I give them credit just for doing it. It doesn't matter if it's right. It doesn't matter if they got an 86% or a 92%. I'm happy that they just had their time on task and that they were engaged with the material. And it's easier for me later to not have to start from scratch where they've seen some of these concepts before. And so I do just give them credit for the certificate for spending their hour in the activity. But as far as gauging their comprehension, they definitely come to class knowing what they've been exposed to, asking questions about it. So I can definitely tell if they've spent that time on task.
That's great. And I see some questions coming into the chat about accreditation and things too. That's definitely been a big topic of discussion. it's always up to your accreditor if what they allow to use for clinical time. So you would always have to check with your accreditor on that. After COVID, we did actually have a lot of accrediting bodies that started letting schools use simulation-based training or other online approaches for accreditation, since it was, things have changed with clinical settings and students and technology. But I saw that pop in, so I just wanted to answer that real quick. No, I think that's great, Amy. And then what strategies do you use, when students are online and if they're struggling or they're confused in areas, what strategies do you use to kind of help them help address that when they are confused or struggling in specific areas, since you are online and meeting this way?
Yeah, we do meet via Zoom, so we have the students have an opportunity to ask questions there, go over concepts, and I'm very responsive to email. I pride myself in being available to students, sometimes usually within an hour during the workday, because I'm not there with them in a classroom, and I want to be able to answer those questions on the fly as they come up, and they don't have to wait 24 hours for a response. So I am very connected with my students. I have a smaller group, so I'm not dealing with 50 students where I'm getting questions all the time. That would be a little cumbersome, but it definitely does. One of Jennifer mentioned here, it does enhance our
Mhm.
in-person time. We don't use it as a replacement. We actually have very intensive, long days when we do get together in our format, but we don't use it. But it definitely does enhance the process of questions that come up.
Yeah, agreed. And I think part of that enhancement again is even just exposing them to things before, if they have clinical time before they get to that clinicals, because it just helps prepare them. So that's good to know. What do you feel have been some unexpected pros and cons that you encountered when implementing your flipped classroom for remote students?
A couple of the pros, definitely it is a safe place, like you mentioned, for them to go in and do it as many times as they want. Safe place for them to make mistakes or ensure that patient safety is going to be upheld. It's a great place for them to start out their study process. They're able to rewind, fast forward, repeat it multiple times. I have some learners who learn really fast, some who learn really slow. I have a good majority, maybe a quarter to a third of my students already work in the field of medical assisting or in healthcare of some type of capacity. So it allows them, that ability to connect what they're doing at work with what they're doing in the classroom. A couple of cons, like I said, I was really worried about the Wi-Fi. I was really worried about remote connectivity in villages, and that really hasn't been one of the cons. Um, Two of the cons that I would say is that sometimes the simulations don't always line up exactly to our simulations specific activities, the steps that I have the students do in lab, but it's a good introduction. And when I have contacted Simtix about things that I've found that aren't quite the same, I ask them to look at it, and they do. They're receptive to looking at my feedback and taking my feedback. So I'm really appreciative of that. They also, I find it harder to evaluate soft skills with simulation. We do a lot of play in our class. We do telephone technique on Zoom. We take messages on Zoom. We call in prescriptions on Zoom. We do a lot of simulation and role play for those soft skills more in person than really through the simulation. Simtix does have some soft skills, but I find that it's a better experience for the students to be able to work on that live in person and get feedback immediately.
That makes sense. That's good feedback. Wonderful. I know somebody asked, or I saw Jennifer ask the question about people who do not have internet or Wi-Fi. I'm not sure if anybody has a good answer for that one. If anyone has, I know we can engage the students with many interactive activities. Or I don't know, Amy, if you've ever had the situations that your students use Wi-Fi. If anybody has any feedback, feel free to put it in the chat, for Jennifer. We can definitely take, we can definitely take some more questions right now too. If I'm gonna try to go back through, leave a minute here. If anybody else has any other questions right now, we can try to answer some of those. I don't know, make sure I didn't miss anything. So feel free if you do have an immediate question, if you want to put anything else in the chat right now. I love how to use a flipped classroom instead of lecturing from a PowerPoint. Hopefully those have answered your questions. Flipped classroom can definitely be better than yeah, lecturing through a PowerPoint. It's so much has changed in the last few years with our technology and ability to do that. Okay, if we don't have any other immediate questions, again, we'll go ahead and continue on since we only have about 7 minutes left. Again, if you do think of anything else, feel free to put it in the chat. So really kind of next, we want to just talk about like maximizing your in-person sessions. So Amy, let us know your thoughts on basically transforming your in-person classroom time to leveraging knowledge students are gaining from their pre-class work. How do you transform that in-classroom time to knowledge of the pre-classroom work, if that makes sense?
Well, we meet twice a semester, and everybody comes together in the same classroom. I travel to my students instead of them coming to class. I mean, we all meet in the same locations. We have different locations throughout the state, and I travel to them. And we get together twice a semester for some very long days of practice. And so we have those skills that we've built on. Maybe week 2, we covered vital signs, and they looked at blood pressures and pulse oximetry and temperatures, and they've done the simulations to support that. They've done the homework to support that. They've done different quizzes or tests on that content. When we get together, we can just take the time to practice. They already have done that prep work, so we can pull out the pulse oximeter. We can pull out 3 different types of thermometers and practice that technique. We can pull out the tools that they need so that they get that hands-on. So in that sense, they're very prepared for those hands-on skills. They know what's coming. They've done kind of the prep work before, and then we can just utilize those hands-on skills during our intensives, which we meet halfway through, and then again at the end of the semester for those intensives. And the
Perfect. And
students
Amy,
all have the same instructor. It's just me. So
yeah.
they're getting the same meal deal wherever they go. They're getting the same equipment. They're getting the same instructor. They're getting the same assignments. So no matter where they're at in our state, they can, if they're part of our program, they're getting the same experience as those other students in those other locations.
That's great. And we had a good question come in the chat from Jamie. So to know if you want to take a moment if you see that question.
How receptive are students when the evaluations or simulations do not line up exactly? How do I prepare them for this? This is something that comes up occasionally, and I just explain it's part of their practice time. There aren't a lot that are very, very different, but there are a couple. One recently, swabbing the throat there was a difference of what our skills and what I was teaching. And Simtix, I reached out to them and I said, hey, can you look at this? Here's some textbook information that you can base your response in. And they were very responsive to me. And so that now aligns with some of the traditional skills. There another one that Simtix does is they do 4 medication checks instead of 3. I require them to do it 3 times before they even touch the patient. But a 4th time after you administer isn't going to hurt. So I explain that to them, for the purposes of our checkoff, you're going to do it 3 times before you touch that patient. But Simtix has you do it a 4th time after the medication's been administered. So they're pretty good with that. They just go with the flow. And they haven't really had much of an issue with that. Yes, I do record lectures, Laura.
And Casey, that's our question in there too. Amy, is your course offered as a hybrid, or I don't know if you were asking about Simtix too. Simtix is all online. So our simulations are all online. That schools use our simulations in conjunction with their program and their curriculum. So we do, I'll let Amy answer. We do have a lot of schools that use Simtix as a hybrid program. If they have on-ground students, then they'll use Simtix. But Simtix is personally all online. But it sounds like yours is hybrid
Yeah,
thing?
our clinical classes are hybrid. They are a blend of online and face-to-face. Our administrative class is completely online. We don't meet and do those competencies and those activities. That is completely online. But the clinical course that I use the SimTix in, yes, it is hybrid. We use our lab time. I count our lab time. Casey had a question about for a traditional 3-hour course. We calculate our lab time just for the face-to-face. So anything that they do in addition, such as SimTix or any, even their Zoom time that when they're in class, we would have them calculating out their face-to-face time as their lab time. So does that answer that question? So like 52 hours for a class for 4 credits. Not sure if that answers your question.
If you have any additional
We use the
questions, I can.
Carnegie unit. So 1 credit is 52 hours. The Carnegie units are kind of what I go by so that we're getting that on time. Okay, she says thank you.
I know we're getting short on time. We technically only have a minute left. Amy, I don't want to skip over anything. Do you let us know your closing remarks or any advice you want to give to educators who are considering transitioning to a flipped classroom or not sure where to go, what to do? Any final thoughts or?
Yeah, I definitely believe in letting the students drive their journey. You know, some need a little more guidance, some need a little less guidance, but they're the ones that have to do the work. And as an Alaska reference, I'll just say it's like a cruise, you know, and I'm their tour guide. They have to go on the adventure. They have to go climb the glacier. They have to go visit the fish cannery. They have to do the work, but I'm here to guide them and support them, give them feedback and put them in the right direction.
And Amy, we had a good question that came, I think it was Michelle, cut off the name a little bit. Do you feel the flipped classroom is easy with 6-week classes?
We meet, actually, it's a 14-week semester and we meet halfway through. So we meet at week 6 and 7, and then we meet again at week 13 and 14. So yes, it's very easy because the content is fresh in their mind over those last few weeks, and we can get down to business when we do get together. So we meet for 4 solid days from morning till night, for 4 days, 6 weeks in, and then 4 days at the end of the semester as well. So 8 total days of day to night clinicals.
And I know in my experience, we have customers that have as short as 4-week programs. We have a lot of customers that have 6-week programs, 8-week programs, and then customers that have 2-year programs. So if I know we're at time right now. If anybody has any other comments or feedback they want to put in the chat, we'll make sure to send that out. If anybody does need information about our program or have any other additional questions, oh yeah, we had some testimonials from Amy's students too, but if anyone would like more information, feel free to obviously leave us your information and we will have someone contact you back as well if you do need any additional information regarding the simulations too.
And I put my email in. I'm happy to collaborate with anybody and ask questions and get together. I'm a program of one, so I love collaborating with other people. You're welcome to contact me as well.
And Sabrina, I just saw your question. If anyone is in need of a certificate, if you want to write, just make sure to leave your name and email in the chat, and then I can get back with you and make sure you get a certificate for attending the webinar as well.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming. Come see us in Alaska.
Thank you all. Have a good day.